Well, hello there. Brent here, the Bring Your Own Tools. On today's episode, we are doing an amazing laundry room makeover. If you want to learn how to do it, keep on watching. Let's get started.
So here it is, ground zero BYOT laundry room. It's all over the place, as you can see. Things strewn about, nothing's organized, and it's one of those rooms that I just haven't put a lot of time and energy into for years. But you know what? My wife has been dying for a makeover in this room, and she deserves a laundry room makeover. So we are going to be completely transforming this entire space from top to bottom. First things first, we need to get a new washer and dryer, because who doesn't love an appliance upgrade? Now, I am moving these to the side because I'm working in one specific space first, and then I'm going to move them back into position. I decided to spackle all the holes and the scrapes from Kona over the years, and once it's dry, I apply a light sanding to it. Now, I would normally apply some texture to this wall after it's dry, but because these walls are so smooth, I'm going to be leaving it as is and painting right over it. I removed the existing wall base just because it's ugly and we need a little bit more of a refresher in this space. Now there's a lot of awkward spaces in this entire area, and therefore I have decided to actually spray the paint onto the walls instead of just using your generic roller. Now when you spray, you gotta tape off everything, which is what I'm gonna be doing in this entire room other than the ceiling. I always find the best way to do this is just to take some painter's tape and then use some painter's visqueen to wrap off all larger spaces. I apply the tape first just to make sure I have a nice clean line on all of my trim, and then I bring over the visqueen to enclose the entire area, especially if it's a larger area.
So, now comes time to the fun part, the actual painting portion. And for this painting portion, we're going to be using the Wagner Flexio 3000. Now, I've featured this sprayer in a number of different projects, and guess who paid attention? Wagner, because they are the sponsor of this week's video because they love BYOT so much. So I will leave a link in the description box below to see and check out all of their amazing sprayers that they have. Now, the reason why I love this sprayer so much is because it's super easy to use, as well as the fact that it has a heavy-duty, high-flow nozzle, as well as more of a fine spray nozzle for generic, smaller woodworking projects. This is for larger scale projects, especially for larger scale walls, which is perfect for this application. So, let's start filling and then spraying.
The paint we're using for this project is Mohr 200 from Sherwin-Williams, and the color that we're using is actually called Slate Tile. Now the real nice thing about this sprayer is the fact that it's so easy to use. All I have to do is insert the paint, and for this project I'm actually applying about 5% of water to the mix just to thin it out a little bit in order to have a nice flow over the entire area. With this spray head, you're actually able to adjust the fan spray size, as well as adjust the power of the sprayer to accommodate different types of spraying, whether it's finish work or large scale walls like this. As I mentioned earlier, the real reason why I'm using this sprayer is really because this room has a lot of oddly shaped areas, especially around the water heater, and therefore trying to spray that entire space versus trying to get my paintbrush in all those tight-knit little areas will make life a lot easier. I personally try to avoid taping off the ceilings, which is why I picked up one of these spray shields. Now the spray shield does an amazing job at making sure all of your off spray does not get on any areas that you don't want it. Now it's not perfect, but it really reduces the amount of spray that you don't want in specific areas, whether that's a door or a ceiling. However, I do highly suggest applying a bit of painter's tape to the front edge first, because that way you can completely remove the tape and you don't have to worry about any of the paint screwing up that front edge, which basically just makes for easy cleanup, which I always appreciated. One item to be sure to have for this project is a good respirator. Especially due to the fact that this is a very small, tight-knit area, you want to ensure that you are protecting your lungs, and therefore a good respirator is always key, as well as some good eye protection, because that's just going to help in the long run. Trust me. As we wait for the paint to dry, we can now start working on our laundry room build out. Now this specifically is going to be a build out that surrounds the washer and dryer in a very nice tight knit area. We're using 3/4 inch MDF, and if you haven't used this stuff before, trust me, it is quite heavy, so make sure you have a second set of hands if needed. The unit itself is going to be protruding out 34 inches from the wall, and therefore that will enclose the actual washer and dryer, as well as leave space for all the electrical and plumbing components. All 3 sheets are going to be cut at the same exact length, and therefore I make sure that I clamp them all together and cut them all at the same time. MDF is super easy to cut. Just note that it's basically a board made up of compressed sawdust, and therefore having a good respirator at this point is also key. The washer and dryer are approximately 27 inches wide, and therefore the top panel is being cut at 58 inches long. That will provide space for the side panels as well as an air gap around both units. As for the legs of the built-in, I am cutting these at 53.5 inches, which accommodates for at least a ½ inch of space at the top of each unit. In my specific situation, I do need a slight cutout at the very bottom on both legs because my concrete foundation is actually protruding past both walls. Hopefully you don't have to deal with this, but luckily I did. Now, one thing you do have to account for with MDF is that it's a very smooth surface, but if you don't pre-drill your holes, this material can crack on you very easily. So make sure you always pre-drill all of your holes before applying fasteners. I do want a bit more support on these seams, and therefore I glue them in place before inserting my screws. I decided to go with screws instead of finish nails, mainly due to the fact that the pull-out strength for the screws are going to be far superior than finish nails. Once both legs are fully secure, I then take some inside corner brackets and apply those to the back inside corners. Now this will just provide more strength and stability, and you won't even see these because they're going to be buried behind a washer and dryer. At the last minute, I do decide to install a bottom rail just to give both legs a bit more stability, and we'll talk more about that bottom rail shortly. First things first, let's go ahead and bondo all of these corners and holes because we want to ensure that the seams as well as the holes are not noticeable to the naked eye once we apply our paint to the surface. I use Bondo for a number of different reasons. One specifically is the fact that it dries extremely quickly and you're able to sand it within minutes. Also, this product does not shrink on you whatsoever, so once you apply it to the surface and you sand it smooth, you shouldn't see any type of variance between the material as well as the holes and seams. I take my random orbital sander with 320 grit sandpaper and go over all of the seams, especially the Bondo areas. Once I'm done with my sander, I then take a scrap piece of sandpaper and just break all of the facing edges that we'll be actually seeing and feeling just to ensure we have a perfectly smooth surface. Now comes time for the painting portion of this project, and specifically with the Wagner sprayer, we're using the fine spray nozzle. But before we apply our primer, you do want to ensure that the surface is as clean as possible, and therefore I take a tack cloth, and as you can see, plenty to get up. We are first applying the Extreme Bond Primer from Sherwin-Williams with the fine spray nozzle, and mainly because we don't need this to be a super thick, overly done coat. We just want to ensure that we have a perfectly sealed finish on this MDF. And like I've said in the past, slow motion just makes everything look better, right? You do also want to be mindful that the interior should also be primed and painted as well, because even if you don't see it, it still should be properly sealed. I let the primer set overnight and then proceed to applying our top coat. Now this specific top coat is a urethane paint enamel, which basically means that it's extremely durable. It has a beautiful smooth surface like oil, but it's extremely easy to clean because it's a urethane, so soap and water is all you need. I apply 2 coats of this paint to the surface, which I find is plenty for protection and a nice, clean, even finish, even with white paint. And in the end, you just want to spray something like this because you're never going to have a perfectly smooth finish if you did this with a brush or roller. Keep that in mind. Now, as we wait for that unit to dry, we can then proceed to coming inside and taking off all of our tape and protection from the painted walls. In all honesty, personally, this is one of the most satisfying portions of any project that I do because it's like unwrapping a Christmas gift because you don't know what it's going to be like, but you really love and enjoy those nice crisp lines if you can actually get them. Now, I did anticipate that we were going to be applying a ceiling paint to the mix, but I was just going to be applying this via roller and paintbrush because I don't want to tape off this entire area once more. Plus, with the fact that this is such a small area, it doesn't really take much time to do this entire surface. I personally wanted to revamp the interior base to make it a little bit more modern, so I removed the existing, but the one thing that you should keep in mind is keep it on hand because you can actually utilize the same angles that were there before with an angle finder. That makes it a lot easier to determine the exact angle that the original base was at, and therefore you don't have to try and go back and forth with what was actually there versus what you're going to be installing next, especially if you have oddly shaped rooms like this one.
So we have this stretch of base right here, and this corner is super awkward because you can't really get your tape measure in there, which is why you cut a sample piece that you know exactly the length of this piece, which is 11 inches. Push it in, perfect fit there. Now, all you have to do is take your tape measure, go from here to here, and then add your 11 inches. Done deal.
Hopefully that made sense, and if it didn't, please let me know in the comment section below. It's just a really nice, easy way to figure out the exact dimension of your base, especially if they're oddly shaped corners like we have here. At this point in time, we're now ready to bring in our laundry room built in, but I would highly suggest installing some new cover plates for any electrical components now, so you're not doing it later, as well as the fact that it just looks clean and good, and why not make it look good? Now, getting back to our bottom support rail, that's why we want to make sure it's removable. You want to make sure that bottom area is removable because otherwise you're not going to be getting it through any doorway like this. You can always reinstall it later, and I actually beef up this entire system with a large 10x10 L bracket at the top there just to give some more support and stability for this entire unit. I do make sure that it's perfectly level on both the top and the sides, and then proceed to installing some screws in my corner supports. It's now time to hook up my water lines, install my hose, as well as the dryer vent unit that needs to be fully secured before I slide it into place. Like a glove. You can tell I'm a 90s kid, right? Name that movie. After I had all those items fully installed, I figured I wanted to beef up that center support of the MDF, and therefore I just installed a small little panel that went right in between, which provided a perfect seam and support. As for the base, I always suggest applying a bit of caulking on the top edge just to have a nice clean, even finish, as well as filling all of your nail holes. Now, my one trick is actually using something like this. This is a piece of plastic that I cut a little triangle out of, and I'm able to fill all of these nail holes extremely quickly without having to worry about excess putty, which is a time saver in the long run. Trust me. I'm doing this wall now because this was the wall in which the washer and dryer were up against when I was spraying, and therefore I had to do them in 2 separate sections. Luckily, very easy, as well as the trim adjacent to it, which has been like this for years, and I'm finally now getting around to it. And as you can see, these small little sections of spackle are easily removed with just a damp sponge, which is always nice because no dust. Now, I should have sprayed all of this product when I was spraying the built-in, but guess what? I wasn't thinking, and therefore I have to paint this by hand. but just keep that in mind because you should try and spray things together because it's just going to be easier on you. Now I did ask my wife, what kind of shelves do you want? And guess what she said? IKEA shelves. Yes, IKEA. Luckily we have one close by, and after going through the very long maze of IKEA, I found the ones that she wanted, which are actually pretty nice for IKEA and pretty smooth, I must say. Now I didn't get bogged down too much at IKEA, but I did find this and I just felt like I had to get one, right? Yes. The system itself comes with a top mount as well as standards and brackets that you have to fully assemble, obviously. But the one really nice thing about this system is that it is quite sturdy, and the fact of the matter is that it's what my wife wanted. It looks beautiful, it looks clean, and guess what? It's all about making her happy, at least on this project. I also picked up this nice pegboard panel system at IKEA for just generic brooms and so forth. I also picked up this wall-mounted clothing dryer because I wanted to get everything I could off of the floor as much as possible, and therefore this will really save some space, especially when it's not in use. And of course, once we have the final touch fully installed, guess what? We are done! I absolutely love this transformation. As you can see, there's so many unique aspects to this entire space now, and the fact of the matter is, this space before, you didn't want to spend any time in it because it was just so dingy and sad. But with this new space and this new beautiful makeover, it's a space that I personally would want to spend some time in. And that is how you know it is one beautiful, sexy beast of a laundry room makeover. Oh yeah. But guess what? This is a surprise video, right? Let's get to the surprise.
Oh my goodness.
Oh yes!
Oh my gosh. This is amazing. What?
What do you think? What do you think? Do you like it?
The color is amazing. I'm so glad you picked that.
Yeah.
You did an amazing job. So many places for my things.
All of the baskets.
Yes, so many baskets.
Right, Coney?
Oh my gosh, this looks. Oh my gosh. That is so cute. Oops. Oh.
Sorry, I should have said something. It wasn't quite fixated. It's okay. That's okay. That was my fault.
Okay, yeah.